Now, I have been performance testing the game for a full year now, and this is one aspect of the game that I was highly critical of. The performance started very poorly at version 1.0. The game was running very poorly on even the most expensive devices. With time, that has definitely improved. It is still improving, and if we compare the game now and if you compare the game back in version 1.0, the performance difference is quite big. And the main reason for the poor performance was the use of an old API called OpenGL. Basically, OpenGL creates a lot of CPU overhead, and it is simply not suitable for a complex game like Wuthering Waves. Now, as I mentioned before, with time, performance did get better and better, and today, after a little update, when I was looking in the configuration files, I've seen something quite pleasantly surprising. I have seen a Vulkan BLK file, which means that they have added Vulkan support to Wuthering Waves. Now, today I'll be performance testing Vulkan and OpenGL. I can safely say you can use Vulkan in Wuthering Waves now, and it works. However, it is still in, I would say, primitive experimental stage. It's definitely not ready to be fully used and completely swapped into, as you will see today. But Vulkan is here, and I already saw some of the benefits that Vulkan brings to the game, less heating and stuff like that. Overall performance that's one of the weird aspects. Here's the Vulkan thing in the configuration file that it just appeared out of nowhere after a little update today. And again, pleasantly surprised that I've seen this here, which means, you know what, I'm about to go and show you how the current Vulkan implementation in Wuthering Waves works. Now, as I mentioned before, at the moment, it is still in very early stages, and it's still not fully, they're not still using Vulkan's full potential. But it is good that it's there. It's currently very buggy, as you will see, it's very buggy actually, but it works, and I immediately saw a significant reduction in the overall heat output. So, besides that, I also attempted to enable ray tracing, because with Vulkan you can actually have ray tracing, but that seems to be disabled. You cannot enable ray tracing on mobile at the moment. I tried to trick the game, but it seems that it doesn't work, and it just means that ray tracing will be added to mobile. Proper full Vulkan support is obviously going in, and it's going to be added into the game. And as I mentioned before, this is something that other open world games, which I think we all know what open world game I'm referring to, even after 5-6 years, still did not do. Kuro did take a year to add Vulkan into Wuthering Waves, but they added it. The other game did not, and they'll never add it. There's a reason why it's no longer a certain game could never. It's now a certain game will never, and that's for a very good reason. Unfortunate reason, but it is what it is. Meanwhile, Wuthering Waves and Kuro actually did add Vulkan support. It's not enabled by default because it's still very buggy, but there's a way to enable it. However, I would recommend now that you stick with OpenGL, because it simply just gives, at the moment, better overall stability. And I would say at the moment, because of the current experimental implementation of Vulkan, I would say that it's not ready to be fully utilized yet. So if you want to try out, I mean, you can, but I would personally right now recommend that you stick with OpenGL, because Vulkan is not fully ready yet for Wuthering Waves. They're working on it, they've added it into the game, but I would say it's definitely not ready to be fully utilized. But it's a good sign, as I mentioned before, it's a very good sign. They're working on it, and as I mentioned, I promised this before, once I see Vulkan, I'm 100% going to trust Kuro. I'm 100% trusting them now. I have no doubts anymore. Sure, the game is not quite perfect, and there's things that I can complain about. For example, the 50-50, the way that they're spamming all the new characters every month, making it quite difficult to save up for one or two yeah, that's a thing that I can complain about. But when it comes to performance and technical stuff, I think they're in the right place and they're definitely doing the right thing. And as I mentioned before, today I'll be showing you how Vulkan looks on Wuthering Waves, how the current implementation of it works. Now, again, a very early build of Vulkan for Wuthering Waves, very early. Everything about this is very early, not perfect, far from perfect. And I wouldn't suggest that you turn it on because, for the most part, there's a lot of bugs and glitches that I'm going to show you today. But it's there. Just being there is more than enough for me to kind of completely make me trust in Kuro that they're doing the right thing here. And well, let's launch the game, and immediately you can see that the API is Vulkan. Finally. I used to have my doubts that I'll ever see this day coming, but it actually happened. And I've been sending feedback actively about this for maybe 3 months or something. I think this is enough proof that they have heard what that I have said, that we have said. They listened. This is something that, you know, brings the developer closer to the player, and I do like that a lot. If a certain other game developer did the same thing Kuro did, they would be in a better place now, but they didn't unfortunately do that, and they're currently experiencing the same thing that Titanic does. Now, let me start to talk about the issues that I have encountered. Some of the things that I've noticed. The FPS seems locked at 4950 FPS. That's a very weird thing. This is a 8 Elite, by the way, 8 Elite device. The maximum GPU frequency is 1.2 GHz or 1200 MHz. That's pretty much the full speed of the GPU. The GPU is running at 340 MHz, which is about 20% of maximum load. So the current driver, Vulkan in this case, the current API seems to be limited, or should I say the developer seems to have limited it on 4950 FPS. Why is that the case? I don't know. Could just be, you know, again, experimental. This is very early build of Vulkan, and it's simply, as I mentioned before, it's not ready. But for a very early build, and for them actually doing this for the very first time, I believe, I would say this is a good step. Not a step. This is actually a jump in the right direction, a good jump in the right direction. 4950 FPS. It's a very weird number though. I don't know why at 49. It's smooth, but it's not 60 FPS smooth, but it's not 40 FPS smooth. It's somewhere in between. But is it playable? I mean, yes, obviously it is pretty much playable. The heat output, that's a very good improvement. Used to be hitting like 60-65 degrees Celsius. Now it's at 47-46. At about the same FPS, so we immediately see a decent reduction in the total heat output on Vulkan, as I have been talking for months now. And the overall, now of course this is running on a custom configuration file, by the way, so running in native resolution, not upscaled, native 1080p or native 2K. Actually, I think it's native full HD, or I have added. I used the old config from the previous video where I used the 2160p. But in any case, it's running in either native 1080p or 2160p, and with that resolution, it is pretty cold. The chip is actually fairly cold. 36 and 34, going up to 45 to 50 on this game, on this resolution, is phenomenal. Now, this is what happens when you turn on the frame generation. On Vulkan, the frame generation does not work. As I mentioned before, very glitchy and very laggy. Not exactly laggy, but very glitchy. So you should definitely not turn on frame generation with Vulkan at the moment, because it gives a light show, to say the least, and it just gives a very weird glitch. So this is pretty much where I figured out and realized, okay, I'm not getting 60 FPS. Well, now I'm getting 60 FPS. It's pretty weird. It's bugged in one way. It's, again, there's a lot of things that they have to do with Vulkan in order to actually make it to work properly. But yeah, it does go to 60. Frame generation does not work because it just does whatever it did there, making the whole screen go to a rave party for a couple moments. And obviously it does give that weird like stutter, and that's pretty much just the API that they've coded in. It's just not ready yet, but that's completely fine. That's understandable. Again, first time that they're doing it. This is the first time that this game sees Vulkan on mobile, and for what it is, it's pretty decent. Now let's actually do some combat. I actually thought that the frame generation does the same thing on pretty much all the FPS options. It just doesn't work on Vulkan. On OpenGL, as you will see in this video later on, it does work, but on Vulkan, currently frame generation does not seem to work. But, I mean, the game does look good, plays smooth, the temperatures are ridiculously low. The temperatures are definitely much better, considering the fact that this is not using the default game resolution and rendering. This is very good. Usually, this device on the current present that I'm using does get to 65-70 degrees Celsius on average, with the same setup that I have with cooling here. The temperatures are definitely 20-30 degrees lower, which is an amazing improvement. And this is pretty much what I've been talking about, that the Vulkan does. It simply is utilizing all 8 cores, and it simply makes the overall heat output much less, which is very good for these mobile handheld devices that in most cases don't really have good cooling, or they just cramped all of that inside in a very small space, and heating is quite present in some of the models. Now let me just quickly turn off, or actually turn on the actually I've been playing around with some settings. I'm trying to figure out if I can actually get the FPS up to like 60 on some other with some other means. I don't really like to use the software-based interpolation. The frame generation that the game does offer is, I would say, better because it's smoother, and overall it just, I would say, works better. No delay, surprisingly. I don't know what kind of magic Qualcomm did with their version of DLSS, but it's really good on the 8 Elite. And that surprised me. I mean, frame generation on this thing pleasantly surprised me. It's actually really good. But yeah, I mean, we are still on Vulkan. Yeah, still haven't swapped. It's actually very easy to swap. It's something that I've learned months ago when I was trying to enable Vulkan in any way, shape, or form, but eventually I realized that I cannot enable it because it's simply not enabled in the engine of the game. That's something that only the developers could do. I tried all different Unreal Engine INI commands that I've seen on the internet, and I knew that these commands existed. And when I saw the Vulkan file in the storage of the device, I immediately knew, okay, time to use those old codes again, those old configuration files that I used like months ago. They work. They're quite huge. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there that I've written in, but they seem to work. Some of the lines don't work though, so I had to remove some of them, but for the most part, the default ones, the basic ones, seem to work. It's pretty simple. Honestly, this is pretty simple Unreal Engine stuff. A simple Google search on the Unreal Engine forums can give you like thousands of different lines that you can pretty much put into any Unreal Engine 4 game. This is something built into the game, built into the engine. This is something that all Unreal Engine based games have. You can do the same trick on any Unreal Engine based game. This is one of the reasons why I do like the engine, because it does give you a lot of things that you can do, and primarily on the enhancing the graphics part, which is fine. I mean, this is not modding because you are not adding anything that's not already within the game. You're basically just telling the game to use the already available assets in a slightly different way that just looks better on the screen. That's pretty much what these lines do. And overall, I mean, again, I'm personally pretty pretty damn happy with the direction that the game is going to. It's a good thing, because I think all of us have been afraid that Wuthering Waves will go the way of the G game when it comes to how it runs and how it's treated on mobile. We all know, if we compare the G game on a iOS device and on an Android device, that the difference in overall quality, performance, and the overall beauty of the game is huge. On iOS, the game looks, the G game looks much better, and that's done on purpose by the developers. That's not a secret. I mean, we all know that they have a contract, and yeah, I mean, I'm glad that Kuro did not accept that. Seems they haven't accepted it, because if they did accept the same thing, we would never see Vulkan, we would never see the game actually looking and performing well on an Android device. Which means that Kuro seems to know technology, and they seem to know what is actually the more performant and more capable hardware. I mean, imagine you buy a 8 Elite device and the game just refuses to take advantage of your hardware. I would be mad. I would personally be mad, but thankfully, this game does properly take advantage of the 8 Elite, and it does take advantage. I should. I mean, I'm testing it on an 8 Elite, but I also want to test it on my 8 Gen 2 device. I want to see how Vulkan will perform on a 8 Gen 2. After all, I have been waiting for this for a year now, and kind of ironic that my first experience with Vulkan on Wuthering Waves is on a 8 Elite device, not on the device that I originally wanted it. But it's fine. I'll test it out on the 8 Gen 2 just to see if it will run the same way, or if I will encounter some other issues. You know what would be funny? If the 8 Gen 2 will actually give better FPS than an 8 Elite on Vulkan. That would be pretty hilarious, but we will test that out very soon. Hopefully, I'll just install the game by tomorrow, and it depends on my internet, really. My internet isn't the best. But yeah, Vulkan works on Wuthering Waves. Played around with it a little bit, as you can see. Thermals are amazing. The heat output is simply incredible for the resolution that I'm running in, and for the FPS that I'm getting. It's much better than on OpenGL. And pretty much what I was talking about for months, now we will see that in action. Hopefully, I think by version 2.5 or 2.6 we might actually see Vulkan being implemented in the settings, and you could actually properly switch to Vulkan without having to use tricks, right? But I'm now quite confident that in a version or two we might see a very good Vulkan implementation in this game, and we even might see ray tracing find its way into mobile by then as well. So we are in for a decent couple of next updates regarding the game. Obviously, testing will continue. I will keep testing the game on 2-3 different devices, because as always, things can and will usually go wrong performance-wise, and I will definitely point out all the flaws and issues that can pop in. That's something I feel like is my duty as a content creator, to help out the game in one way or the other. Reporting issues is kind of, if you care about the game, then you definitely do report problems with the game, so that they can get fixed, and that fixed problem, better game. It's as simple as that. But yeah, super stable FPS, I would say. And as I mentioned in the past, once this is fully implemented, and once this is actually done properly, then flatline 60 FPS with 40-30 degrees Celsius temperature on the CPU and the GPU, which is pretty insane. The FPS is about to skyrocket in this game in the next upcoming updates, and I cannot wait to test it out myself as usual. Okay, now we have tested out the Vulkan, and now let me go swap back to OpenGL. It's actually very easy to, as I mentioned before, very easy to swap the APIs back and forth. I'm actually glad that that's the case. It's super easy to test things out properly. And now we are on OpenGL. Now, as I mentioned before, because of the early implementation, OpenGL, since the game is pretty much built upon OpenGL, and Kuro has been optimizing it for a year now. I mean, OpenGL has a year advantage over Vulkan in Wuthering Waves at the moment. Vulkan is like released yesterday in the game, but OpenGL has been pretty much, running the game for a year. So currently it's actually done better on OpenGL, but at the cost of higher temperatures. About 10, 15, 20 degrees Celsius higher temperatures on average. Let me just quickly disable let me just disable this because I didn't have it originally on the first test. Let me just go back to the game. So yeah, with OpenGL currently you will get, in most cases, probably better FPS, although this is tested on one device, so I have no idea how Vulkan will perform on other devices. That's why I have to test it out on a 8 Gen 2, and I'll test it out on a Snapdragon 870 device as well, so that I can have a somewhat complete picture of how the Vulkan performance will look on different chipsets. But yeah, the 8 Elite, for example, on OpenGL in Wuthering Waves doesn't really drop below 60, and it doesn't really drop below 120 FPS. Yeah, 8 Elite runs this game at 120 FPS, which is honestly expectable. It's something to expect from an 8 Elite. This thing is a monster. I already said that this thing blew my expectations out of the water and kind of shattered all of the doubts that I had about this chip. But yeah, 60 FPS, and as we already see, the temperature did definitely rise a little bit more, but the FPS is also a little bit higher, although it's not much of a difference in FPS. Vulkan definitely gives a lot less heat, as expected. With OpenGL you can expect quite a bit of temperature, although it's nothing too much to worry about. 105 degrees Celsius is like the ceiling temperature of this device, so I'm well below the actual maximum temperature, and frame rate is pretty much very stable. I mean, if you have been paying attention to temperature, you can definitely see temperature pretty much doubled. I mean, from about 45, 50 to about 70, 66. So yeah, definitely the temperature is going up with OpenGL. This is, again, one of the things that I've been talking about in the past. OpenGL does make things much warmer and less performant, although in this case it actually gives better FPS because it had more time to be optimized. Now let me go and enable the frame generation on OpenGL currently. I have to mention it's currently, this will be fixed as time goes on, but on OpenGL 120 FPS, yeah, works like a charm. Super buttery smooth. This is actually some pretty scary FPS, not gonna lie. Considering that this is a little phone, it gives 120 FPS on this game, which is honestly not the most optimized game that there is out there. So getting such high FPS is impressive. There is no loss in quality. No, I don't feel any delay. It's surprisingly well done on the 8 Elite. The frame generation just works insanely good. Something that the G game is never going to have on Android. Or if it will have it like in 10 years from now. In 10, 20 years maybe, you will see frame generation in a G game. But yeah, works like a charm if you like frame generation, and if you like that, you can use it. But honestly, I enjoy 60 FPS at the same time. I think with Vulkan I'll just go 120 FPS because it will just give much less heat. But on OpenGL currently I like 60, and the temperatures are actually really low. Not as low as Vulkan temperatures, but they're still pretty low and pretty acceptable, really. I have no complaints about the heat output on the 8 Elite. Obviously, Vulkan will give less heat, as expected, but at the moment it's not too bad. 65 is tolerable. If it were like 90, 95, that's where I start to be, personally, even though it can handle that temperature at 80, 90 degrees Celsius, that's where I personally start to feel uncomfortable, because I just don't like those high temperatures. But 60, 70, that's fine. Even 80, acceptable. But yeah, with OpenGL you can expect a little bit more heat currently, which is again a good thing. And by the way, the only thing I changed between the tests is pretty much turning on and off Vulkan. Resolution, the effects, the quality, the rendering, and everything is pretty much the same as it was. The only difference that I have changed, the only thing that I have changed, is pretty much enabling OpenGL instead of Vulkan, basically returning the API back to the default API. But overall, the 8 Elite does run the game at above 60 FPS, 120 FPS, so in this case, whether it's OpenGL or Vulkan, the only difference will be, in the future, the only difference will be the heat output. With OpenGL you will get more heat, with Vulkan you will get less heat, and I think it will depend from device to device. They will have to do a lot of optimizing with Vulkan, and they will have to do a lot of coding. I mean, that's their job, right? They have to do it. But a huge step in the right direction. Me personally, I'm happier than I was for a whole year. Actually, I'm the happiest I've been in a whole year playing the game. Even though, you know, there's a lot of things that I can complain about, from the anniversary to the overall rate system, 50-50 and stuff like that. All valid complaints. All valid complaints. I mean, I'm not the only one who complains about that. But so far, when it comes to what they've done with the performance and what they're doing with the performance, I'm happy with that. It's just going to get better when it comes to performance-wise of this game. They took, I feel like they took what I said quite seriously. I feel like they took what I said seriously, and it does seem like they may have seen one of the videos I made in the past, because they actually added this. I wouldn't really say that they have added it like way too late, but at the same time, in the past, I've just talked about it, but I was quite active with feedback in the last like 3 months, I believe. 3-4 months, I think I was quite active with feedback. I was pretty much sending them all sorts of tests that I've done, temperatures, data, log files. I've been sending all sorts of stuff regarding, you know, technical stuff. So I think that may have helped. I don't know. I find it quite interesting that it popped in. So, no, not fast, but it popped in quite quickly after I started to pretty much be a bit more vocal about it. And I don't know, I mean, I know they listen. I know it's Kuro. Kuro listens. I'm well aware of that, but it feels a little bit too surreal when it actually happens to you, when you do give feedback and your stuff that you said actually gets implemented and worked on. It feels different, that's for sure. I've been doing the same thing with other games in the past, like Honka Impact and, you know, games like that, and I was never listened to. Like every positive thing that I had to say for actual game improvement, that I've sent all the feedback and stuff like that, got pretty much ignored. It feels so refreshing when a developer actually does listen to what you tell them, and when the game actually gets better after they listen to your feedback. It just feels refreshing, and honestly, and I'm glad that I'm sticking with Kuro Games, because they're doing what old school developers used to do, and I respect that a lot. You know, they might not be perfect. They make mistakes. Some of the things, again, in the game are definitely not what I would like to see in the game, and I'm not the only one who said that. But give them credit when credit is due, and that's pretty much what I'm doing. criticizing is fine, but giving credit is also fine. When they deserve credit, they get credit. When they deserve criticism, they get criticism. It's that's just how things like that work, and that's how games get better. As with the example of Wuthering Waves. Okay, now I said that I tried to enable ray tracing. I tried to use the old trick, but it seems like it's completely removed from the game, which is understandable because Vulkan currently, as we have seen on the start, it does give a lot of weird errors, issues, and I believe that if we were to enable ray tracing, it would probably work. I mean, the game runs in Vulkan, right? So they can get ray tracing to work now, and I would say there's probably a game-breaking bug or something, or a glitch that makes the game completely unplayable, and probably a reinstallation is the only way to get the game back to work again, and that's why they have completely currently turned off any ray tracing option that used to be in the game, by the way, but now it's completely turned off in order to prevent the game from completely destroying itself. I guess that's my personal guess. We have seen the bug on the start, so my wild guess is that ray tracing does give a very similar error to what we have seen with the screen flickering and with the screen doing funny things when the frame generation is turned on. So I would guess that's the reason why ray tracing is currently disabled. But in the game user profile file, or the player user profile, you have the ray tracing option and it's at 0. So it's turned off. They haven't removed that, so that means it will be brought back. So far, when I made a guess like that, I was dead on. I said stuff about Vulkan. I have seen indications of Vulkan that looked like they're working on it. We have Vulkan now. So I'm saying ray tracing is the next big thing that we will see on mobile, and I will be testing that out when that is added. I guess in the next 2 or 3 updates we will see some form of ray tracing in Wuthering Waves. And honestly, whatever type of ray tracing they go for, that's going to be more than enough, really. The game already looks good enough. I personally, on PC, don't see much of a difference with ray tracing on or off. Again, they've made the game to look pretty with or without ray tracing, so I'm not going to really be all in on the ray tracing thing, because I still believe that's a little bit of a gimmick, but if it can make the game look just a little bit better, then I'll test it out and I'll play with ray tracing on when that is added to the game. I haven't added some ray tracing lines just to see if it will have any effect, but obviously all the ray tracing lines that I've added in, they're obviously not going to work, because again, and I basically found those ray tracing lines for Unreal Engine online as well, because I just wanted to find something fast that usually works, that works for other games, and I just added it to see if it will have any effect. Obviously it's not going to have any effect because it's turned off, and I tried the trick, even the ray tracing technically being enabled in settings in the files, it is still turned off. So it is completely turned off, and I would say that's fine. Currently, it's probably not ready. It's not going to give any good performance, to be more accurate, or who knows what kind of error we will see. I'm probably going to be saying that it's probably a very similar error to the error that we get when I turn on the frame generation, giving all the flicker stuff and things like that. That's pretty much what I think happened, and that's why it's off. But in any case, Vulkan works on Wuthering Waves. I have to mark this day on the calendar. March, not March, May, the 8th of May. Alright, good. 8th May, that's when the game got Vulkan support, or maybe even earlier, because I know there's been a little update, and I was wondering what that little update done. Well, apparently that update added the Vulkan file, and yeah, that's the end of this little test. Tell me what you think about the overall progression in performance of this game. Do you have any issues with performance? Again, I'm open up to feedback from players. Does your game run good? Does your game run bad? Have you noticed any difference in performance over time? And with that being said, if you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.